A very important video today: pathogenesis of diabetic ketoacidosis. Uh, we start with an insulin deficiency or absolute absence of insulin that leads to the metabolic finding of hyperglycemia. Hyperglycemia is actually the result of insulin deficiency via different pathways like increased gluconeogenesis, increased glycogen lysis, and similarly decreased peripheral utilization of the glucose that leads to a buildup of glucose in the serum, and we get this hyperglycemia. So when we cross the limit of 180 milligram per deciliter of the presence of the glucose in our serum, what happens that it is the renal threshold, and no, the kidneys start excreting actually glucose. And what happens that glucose is asthmatically active, and it is excreted by the in the glomerular, and it is not reabsorbed at the proximal tubule. What happens that it withdraws water and causes osmotic diuresis. Now, as a result of osmotic diuresis, two very important things happen. Number one is the calorie loss, as glucose is one of the major source of the calories, and when it is lost in the urine, we have a calorie loss. Similarly, dehydration ensues due to this osmotic diuresis. And when dehydration ensues, what happens that reninal angiotensin aldosterone pathway is activated. That leads to hypokalemia through excretion of the potassium and retention of sodium. So we get an electrolyte, a net electrolyte loss or electrolyte disturbance as a result of the osmotic diuresis. Now, due to the calorie loss and dehydration, electrolyte abnormalities, the body is at risk and is at a physiological stress, and this actually leads to the production of stress hormone and release of stress hormone, that is glucagon, catecholamines, cortisol, and growth hormone. Now, glucagon has a very important role in the pathogenesis of diabetic ketoacidosis. That is, lipolysis starts occurring, and that's released the fatty acid into the blood, and that's go to the liver. Ketogenesis ensues, and when ketogenesis ensues, acetoacetate and beta hydroxybutyrate starts building in the blood, and these are the actual acids that contribute to the acidemia in the diabetic ketoacidosis. Similarly, the stress hormone epinephrine, epinephrine, very notorious. Number eight, it decreases the insulin secretion. It peripherally desensitizes the receptors to the insulin, and more hyperglycemia is favored during the release of catecholamines. Another two important hormones of the stress are growth hormones and cortisol. Cortisol is of important mention. Cortisol actually leads to lysis of the protein, and more amino acids are produced, and that are actually shunted into the gluconeogenic pathways to produce more and more glucose, and that is one of the way that hyperglycemia is produced. Similarly, there is another important point to be discussed here, is that when dehydration ensues, renal perfusion decreases, and when renal perfusion decreases, the glucose clearance via kidney decreases, and that actually again leads to and adds to the hyperglycemia. So this is a vicious circle that once initiated, is a self-continuing and self-maintaining cycle.